Hello everyone, I'm Jessica. Today I will tell you the story of Victor Hugo. He was not only a writer, he was a man who lived through revolutions, exile, and love. His books, Les Misérables and The Hunchback of Notre-Dame, are famous all over the world, but behind the books was a life full of drama, struggle, and courage. This is the story of Victor Hugo. Part 1. The Boy Who Saw Too Much. Victor Hugo was born in 1802 in France. At that time, France was full of chaos. Kings had fallen, soldiers marched through the streets, people argued about power, freedom, and justice. His father was a general in Napoleon's army. He believed in action and war. His mother was very different. She supported the old kings. So young, Victor grew up between two worlds, one of change and one of tradition. But there was one moment he never forgot. When Victor was a boy, he saw a guillotine. He saw the sharp blade, the silence of the crowd, and the end of a man's life. Many children would have looked away, but Victor watched closely. He asked himself, why do people cheer at death? Why do others suffer in silence? This moment stayed in his heart. Later, when he wrote about Jean Valjean, the prisoner in Les Misérables, or Quasimodo, the outcast in The Hunchback of Notre-Dame, he was thinking of injustice he had seen since childhood. Even as a young boy, Victor was ambitious. He once said, "I will be Chateaubriand or nothing." Chateaubriand was the most famous writer in France at that time. Hugo wanted to be just as great. Part 2. The Poor Student in Paris. When Victor was a teenager, his family moved to Paris. Paris was noisy, crowded, and alive with ideas. Writers, poets, and revolutionaries filled the cafes. Victor wanted to join them, but there was one problem: money. His family was not rich, and in Paris everything was expensive. Victor often skipped meals. Sometimes he ate only bread and water. But instead of complaining, he used hunger as fuel. He wrote poems late into the night, with cold hands and an empty stomach. When he was 20, Victor published his first book of poems. To his surprise, it won a prize from the French Academy. Suddenly, people began to notice the young poet. He was no longer the poor boy in the corner of a cafe. He was a new voice in French literature. At this time, he also fell in love. Her name was Adèle Fouché. She was his childhood friend. They married in 1822, even though their families did not support it. Their marriage was not always easy. Victor loved Adèle, but he was also distracted by fame, politics, and other women. Still, she stayed with him, even when life became hard. Part 3. Notre-Dame and the Power of Stories. In the 1820s, Paris was changing fast. Old buildings were being torn down. Even the great cathedral of Notre-Dame was falling apart. Many people didn't care, but Victor cared. He decided to write a story that would make people love Notre-Dame again. The result was The Hunchback of Notre-Dame. It was not just about a cathedral. It was about Quasimodo, the bell ringer, ugly on the outside but full of love inside. It was about Esmeralda, a poor girl judged by society. It was about how cruel people can be to those who are different. The book was a huge success. People cried over Quasimodo. They visited Notre-Dame. The government finally decided to save the cathedral. One book saved a building. One story changed how people saw history. Part 4. Exile and Les Misérables. Victor Hugo was not only a writer, he was also a man of politics. He believed in freedom, justice, and democracy. He wanted leaders to care for the poor, not just the rich. In 1851, a man named Louis-Napoleon Bonaparte took power in France. He later became Emperor Napoleon III. Hugo strongly disagreed with him. He wrote speeches and articles against the new emperor. Soon, Hugo's life was in danger. One cold night, he disguised himself and escaped Paris. He fled across the sea, first to Belgium, then to the Channel Islands near England. He would spend almost 20 years in exile. exile was painful. Hugo missed Paris, his friends, and even the streets he used to walk. But he also found freedom. On the island of Guernsey, he had a house with a window facing the ocean. There, with the sound of the waves and the winds, he began his greatest work, Les Misérables. This book was not just a story. It was a mirror of France. It told the story of Jean Valjean, a man who stole bread to feed his family and was punished for life. It showed Inspector Javert, who believed in the law more than mercy. It showed poor children fighting in the streets of Paris. When Les Misérables was published in 1862, it shocked the world. Some critics said it was too emotional. Some said it was too political. But ordinary people loved it. They saw themselves in the characters. They cried, they hoped, they dreamed. The book sold out within days. Across Europe, people lined up to buy it. Les Misérables was not just a novel. It was a revolution in words. It gave a voice to the poor and the forgotten. Part 5. The Return of a Hero. In 1870, Emperor Napoleon III lost a war, and France became a republic again. At last, Victor Hugo was free to return home. When he stepped back into Paris, crowds of people welcomed him. To them, he was not just a writer, he was a hero, a man who spoke truth against power. Even in his old age, Hugo continued to write and fight for justice. He believed in free education, the end of the death penalty, and dignity for all. His home was open to everyone, from artists to beggars. When Victor Hugo died in 1885, millions of people filled the streets of Paris for his funeral. His coffin was carried under the Arc de Triomphe and then placed in the Pantheon, a resting place for France's greatest citizens. He was 83 years old. Victor Hugo's words did not die with him. His books, The Hunchback of Notre-Dame and Les Misérables, are still read today in every language on every continent. His stories remind us that even in suffering there is hope, and even in darkness there can be light.